I recently learned about the fundamental attribution error firsthand. As a teacher, I can be a bit strict when students ignore instructions, often adding comments like, maybe try reading the directions next time. However, when I submitted a manuscript to a journal, I got a quick reply, please try again, but follow the submission instructions. Suddenly, I felt like I was in my students' shoes. Karma grades on a curve, it seems. Hi, I'm Joe, and today we're discussing the fundamental attribution error, my newfound specialty. Ready to dive in?
Yes, let's go.
All right, here we go. Imagine this scenario. Aubrey was running a little late for work, sipping her coffee and mentally preparing for the day ahead. As she merged onto the highway, a red sedan suddenly swerved in front of her, forcing her to slam on the brakes. Her heart pounded as she clenched the steering wheel, muttering in frustration, "Are you kidding me?" Now tell me, why does Aubrey believe the other driver cut her off like that?
Maybe Aubrey thinks that the other driver is a very bad driver.
That's a good thought. Aubrey might indeed be jumping to the conclusion that the other driver is just a poor or careless driver. But what might be some alternative explanations for the other driver's behavior?
Maybe Aubrey thinks that the other person is just rude by nature.
That's an interesting perspective. So, you're suggesting Aubrey might automatically assume that the driver is rude without considering other possibilities. Why do you think Aubrey might make that assumption about the other driver's behavior?
She only has access to the negative emotions that she is personally feeling. She doesn't have access to what's going on inside of the other driver's head.
Exactly. You've hit the nail on the head. When Aubrey is feeling frustrated, she might interpret someone else's actions through a negative lens because of her own emotions. That leads us to our key idea. She's probably making an assumption based on her feelings rather than considering other factors. So, why do you think it's important to think about alternative explanations for the other person's behavior?
It could be that the other person was just in a rush.
Absolutely. The other driver might have been in a hurry because of an emergency, a last-minute obligation, or maybe even just being distracted. Can you see how considering these alternative reasons helps us avoid jumping to conclusions? What do you think this tendency to assume that someone's behavior is due to their character, like being rude or careless, is called?
I believe that is what's called the fundamental attribution error.
Exactly. You've got it. The fundamental attribution error is when we tend to attribute someone's actions to their character or personality while ignoring possible external factors that could be influencing their behavior. It's a common human tendency. So in Aubrey's case, she's probably making that error by assuming the driver is just rude or a bad driver instead of considering that maybe they were in a rush or distracted. Now, to deepen our understanding, can you think of a recent time when you felt frustrated with someone? Maybe a situation where you might have jumped to a conclusion about their character?
I remember being in a grocery store. I was in a bit of a rush in the checkout line, and the person at the front of the line was just in conversation with the grocery checker. And there was a big long line of people behind them, and it was really starting to irritate me because it felt insensitive.
That sounds frustrating, for sure. So you felt irritation because it seemed like that person was being insensitive to everyone waiting behind them. Now, thinking about it, why do you think you felt this way? Do you think it might have been because of how their behavior appeared, or could there be other reasons behind their actions?
Yeah, all that I could see was, two people laughing and joking, and I myself was in a rush at that moment. So yes, I interpreted that in a negative light.
Exactly. You were likely interpreting their laughter and conversation as inconsiderate, something that seemed to reflect their personality or attitude, when in reality, they might simply have been caught up in a moment of friendliness or maybe even unaware of how long they were taking. This is a perfect example of the fundamental attribution error. It's interesting how our own feelings, like being in a rush, can influence how we interpret others' behavior. So, what do you think might be some other explanations for why they were chatting so animatedly at that moment?
Well, it turns out that they were two old friends who really just hadn't seen each other in a long time. And so by the end of the conversation, it was clear that they were very glad to have run into each other by chance.
That's a wonderful realization. It shows how much our initial interpretation might have been influenced by our own mood and assumptions, rather than the full story. When we learn about the real context, it often paints a different picture, like here, where their joyful reunion was the real reason for their chat. So thinking about this, what do you think is a good habit to develop when you find yourself feeling annoyed or frustrated at others?
It's probably wise to take a deep breath and try to come up with some alternative explanations for why an event is happening, even though it might at first feel very frustrating. And at first I might attribute negative causes to what's going on. It might be wise to take a step back and look for alternative explanations.
Exactly. Taking a deep breath and consciously looking for alternative explanations can help us avoid jumping to negative conclusions. It's about giving ourselves a moment to pause and see the bigger picture, rather than reacting instinctively based on our initial feelings or assumptions. That's a powerful strategy to cultivate patience, understanding, and empathy in our daily interactions. You've done a fantastic job exploring this together. You're all set. Thanks for your thoughtful participation. You're finished for today.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure chatting with you. Remember, a little reflection goes a long way in understanding ourselves and others better. Have a fantastic day and keep practicing those insightful thoughts. Take care.